Hello and welcome to another managerial special from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Craig Surgeon. With me, as always, is Mr. Daniel Cody. This should be the final championship managerial appointment for the summer, at least. This time we are at Blackpool and they've reappointed Michael Appleton as their head coach on a contract till June 2026. In their statement, the 46-year-old returns to Bloomfield Road on the back of a 3-year stint and in charge of Lincoln City. Coming within 90 minutes of guiding Lincoln back to the second tier of English football for the first time in 60 years in 2021, Appleton managed just shy of 150 games with the Imps. Prior to that, he held prominent coaching roles in the Premier League at Leicester City and West Brom, and achieved managerial success by leading Oxford to the Sky Bet League One promotion, as well as consecutive EFL Trophy finals. Michael Appleton now in charge. Let's talk about, before we get into Michael Appleton, let's talk about the man who was previously in charge, and that was Neil Critchley, who surprised pretty much everyone by joining the backroom staff at Aston Villa.
Yeah, it's the exact reverse of one of our first managerial specials of the summer in Michael Beale, obviously, who left that vacancy at Villa to take a championship managerial job. So a bit of a weird one. I mean, it's probably, I would say Critchley leaving as an individual moment is probably the most surprising moment of the summer so far in the championship, certainly in the circumstances and the reasoning. Obviously, I'm sure financially it's a gain for him, and it's hard to begrudge him it because he did a wonderful job at Blackpool on the pitch. That's got to be said. Bringing them back up, the way they played this year, the recruitment behind the scenes, it was fantastic from top to bottom. And they played good football for a large part too. But I was so surprised by that. I don't really think we could believe it happened, but they've taken a long time to appoint a manager. They're not the only club that have done that this summer, Blackpool. It's taken them a few weeks. We've obviously done two earlier this week from the northwest of England already, but I'm almost as surprised by the man that's come in. And again, the circumstances behind it, because, you know, I'm sure we'll get onto it, but when we were doing those other two on Tuesday, we were probably at the time researching Liam Rosenior, who betting was suspended on becoming manager. And it's not often the bookmakers get it that wrong from that situation. So it does leave a little bit of a question mark behind the scenes, but really shocked by Neil Critchley leaving. Did a wonderful job, but probably has left a sour note. And equally surprised by the man that you're about to ask me about.
Yeah, so incoming is Michael Appleton. It's his second stint in charge at the club. He did manage them in 2012 with only 11 games, winning 2, drawn 7, but only lost 2. So a win percentage of 18%. But that was at a time where fans were on the owners' backs and the owners were doing some really dodgy stuff. Obviously, Blackpool are a totally different club now, new owner, etc. Are you surprised by this appointment, though?
God, yeah, I'm surprised by the appointment. It's a hard one because I had an initial judgment on this, and then having done more research, it's changed a little bit, because the first 3 jobs, and you mentioned the Blackpool one as part of that, the first 3 permanent managerial jobs he had were all clubs in absolute messes off the pitch. Obviously, Pompey were in a huge decline at the time. It was a year after they'd come down from the Premier League. We all know what went on there for a few years. Blackpool, you mentioned the curse word, the Oyston situation, which was carnage for years as well. And then he went to Blackburn, which was in the early stages of the Venky's not long after relegation. So you could argue he didn't pick his clubs well early doors, but equally, he was probably unfortunate with some of the messes he inherited behind the scenes, and maybe a little naive to think that he could resolve them. But after that, you've got to say he's had a relatively solid career. He did a very good job at Oxford, had a very good win percentage, but they're a club that always offer stability. We'll take out the Leicester caretaker stint, where, to be fair, he went back to the top level and earned his stripes as an assistant. I think it was with Craig Shakespeare at the time. And then at Lincoln, did a really good job. Obviously was thwarted by Blackpool in the playoff final, ironically. And then last season, I know it was a disappointing year, but obviously pre-season was scuppered by personal health concerns, which are far more important than football. So I don't know whether to give him a little bit of a free pass for last season based on that, adding that Lincoln had lost 1 or 2 players as well. So I was initially very surprised and thinking, oh, that seems a little bit off. But having looked at it a bit more, maybe it's not quite so bad as it first looked. He's certainly a manager that plays the right way. And looking at Neil Critchley and having an easy turnover of players, an easy turnover of style, I'd certainly say it fits that mold, to be fair to them.
Well, exactly. If you look at his 2 stints where he was successful, he got given time at Oxford and at Lincoln. You have to think that, considering how tough the championship is, he will need to be given time.
Yeah, and let's be fair. I know Blackpool had a wonderful first season up last year, but they're still going to have one of the smallest budgets in the league. There are a number of powerhouse sides last year. We mentioned it with some of the clubs at the top. The West Broms and that with parachute payments last year who really underachieved. Sheffield United stayed down as well. There are going to be clubs that have got a lot of money and a big war chest. I know there were one or two exceptions last year. You look at our club Luton, you look at Huddersfield on a slightly smaller budget, but it is a very difficult league to break into that top six or anywhere near it. And Blackpool aren't going to be aiming for that straight away. Let's be fair here. But Blackpool have to remain a championship club. It's going to be one hell of a battle between probably anywhere up to 14 teams that could get dragged into that battle. And whether Michael Appleton's the right man for that, I'm not 100% sure. But the one thing I will give him in those previous two jobs, he was given time. His recruitment was generally good, something that was so key for Blackpool the last 2 years. And the playing style was relatively similar. So if the fans can get past the fact that obviously we haven't even mentioned he was basically a Preston playing legend, he's obviously had a terrible stint in charge before. If the fans can get past that, I think that it'll probably be all right. But it is going to be about the atmosphere at the ground, which was largely brilliant last year.
Yeah, I got no questions about the atmosphere being with last season. I think they tried to make it as hostile as they possibly could. And looking at a couple of Blackpool fans on YouTube that want to obviously they vlog their games, I think they're quite nice actually. So you should go and check them out. I think it's Lee Charles. Check them out; it's very good. He's got given a 4-year deal. Do you think that's a bit excessive? Because they might think he might get poached by another club.
Well, it's hard to tell because obviously Critchley got signed to a similar length deal only a year or so ago in the November.
Yeah, he signed a new deal early in the season, didn't he?
Yeah, and that was till 2026 as well. And obviously it's led to them getting probably a rather sizable payout for him. So you can argue it works both ways, but it is a risk. There's no doubt about that. I think we have to be fair. The club have taken their time. And since they've had this sort of new fan ownership group and the people at the head of the club, they've very often made the right decisions. They've worked incredibly closely with the community, the fans. The fans are coming back to the stadium, creating a good atmosphere. The playing squad is young generally, it's hungry. It's players that have often been recruited from the lower leagues and have become stars and in some cases moved on. So look, the club's doing everything right. And while there was initial bit of bad reaction to the appointment, you immediately saw fans in the comments on social media saying, well, hang on a minute, this board have got nearly everything right so far. So give them a break, give them an opportunity. And I think they'll be absolutely fine on that basis. He's obviously, crucially, we've mentioned it throughout the summer, head coach rather than manager. The recruitment behind the scenes at Blackpool, I mean, I talked about it virtually every other week in our predictions last season, every match day, because it's just stunning. And a new hero came from the lower leagues and became a star each week. So it's just a bit of a risk, isn't it? I think that's the surprise. But for a 4-year deal, they're a club that smacks of stability since the new ownership. So I'm not that surprised that it was a long deal. And even if it had been Rosenior, I would have expected 3 or 4 years again.
As you said, recruitment is going to be key. Players are going to be linked. Keshi Anderson, I've seen recently, has been linked. Josh Broder had a good second half of the season. It wouldn't surprise me if a bid came in for him. Keeping hold of those type of players are going to be crucial for Appleton.
It is, and it's the same for so many clubs. I mean, we've talked about it even at the other end of the table when we were doing the Blackburn one earlier in the week. 2 or 3 players being sold can be the difference between 6th and 16th and 20th. You know, that's how tight the championship is. It only takes 1 or 2 key players to go. I agree with you on Josh Bowler. I thought was magnificent the second half of last year. Scored a lot of highlight reel goals, which never helps when clubs are looking at short videos of players and people who might be able to make a difference in individual moments of a game. But the one thing I will say about Blackpool, and it's very similar to our club, is that they have a very closely knit team that works incredibly hard, that despite its attacking intent is very disciplined. They're probably one of the strongest sides on the counter in the championship that I saw last year. And I don't think they're the sort of club that's going to be disrupted by 1 or 2 going. I would trust them to recruit well to replace them. The club has a clear philosophy. The fans know what it is. The fans know what to expect. And that's half the battle. So I wouldn't be too worried about 2 or 3 leaving. I don't think it'll make a huge difference to their season individually, but they are a club that are going to be one of the favourites for relegation. And regardless, I mean, even for Luton, who finished 6th last year, staying up is the first battle, and Blackpool is going to be no different.
Looking forward to that. How do you think, 2 questions to this. How do you think Blackpool will do next season? And do you think Appleton will last to 4 years?
Next season, look, I think it's going to be a tough year. The second season up, generally is for most of these clubs. So I've got no doubt that it's going to be a little bit tricky. Obviously, we're sort of halfway through a bit of a weird summer at the moment. We've got an early start to the season. The transfer window's moving very slowly. And we've obviously got this 6-week break in the winter for the World Cup, which I actually think benefits sides like Blackpool, because they're not going to have, with respect, too many players going off and playing. And some of the bigger sides in the league are probably going to lose 3 or 4 star players to the World Cup. And I think that could make a real difference for that busy winter period when we come back. So I actually think Blackpool may get a little benefit from that. The issue is, you look at the clubs coming up, we're going to throw money at it. Sunderland the same, because they're coming back after so many years away. They're not going to want to go straight back down. The pool of teams you would expect to naturally be in a relegation battle on budget is decreasing, and that makes Blackpool's job harder. The one thing that I really got right in the predictions of the Championship last year was that Shane Lavery was going to be a star, and he was. I couldn't get through the whole video without mentioning him. They need 1 or 2 more of him. And if they get that, they can stay up. But for me, I wouldn't look ahead. Staying up's the battle. I think it's going to be a scrap, and it probably comes down to recruitment. At the moment, I'm sitting on the fence for it. But come the end of July, if there's not much movement in, maybe we'll have to start to worry a little bit.
And in the future?
For Michael Appleton for the 4 years, I think if he stays up, he keeps his job. I think that should be the only remit, and playing decent football. Look, there are clubs that have offered stability. Neil Critchley was given time, but of course he was wildly successful, which makes it a lot easier to do that. I think as long as the positive signs on the pitch come from coaching, from style of play, as long as the fans are able to get on board with the way he plays, which they should do if he plays like his best at Lincoln and Oxford, because they were a good side to watch, then I think it'd be fine. Seeing out the 4 years, statistics would tell you in the Championship it's virtually impossible, but I would see him being here beyond the end of next season for sure.
Yeah, I think I have to say the same thing. I think Blackpool might be lower than where they were last season. I think I tipped them to be relegated. I think it's tipped them like second bottom or something like that, or third bottom, which they did obviously make me look silly. But yeah, I expect them to be in the bottom 6, I would say, considering where other teams are going to probably, like, it depends on off the field stuff, really. They'll probably finish 10th with all financial penalties for everyone else. I don't know. I think next season will be tough for them, but I think Appleton will get it right the season after that if he keeps his job. I can see him lasting the 4 years. I really do, unless another club goes in for him, which he somehow seems to get, and that's not being disrespectful to him. It's just he seems to be highly regarded. So I think it'd be fine. Appleton. It's not like the expectations. It's not that high compared to other clubs that we've just done, like Burnley and Blackburn, for example. The expectations are a lot higher compared to like Blackpool. They just got promoted. They're finding their feet again, considering the mess they had in the early 2010s after they got relegated from the Premier League. That's our thoughts on the appointment of Michael Appleton as head coach of Blackpool. Do you agree with what we have said or not? Let us know in the comments. So where do you think Blackpool will finish next season, and how do you think he'll get on the job? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter at Honest Football 3. And we'll see you next time.